If you are an active duty service member ready to transition out of the military, a loving spouse seeking support and resources on how to cope with PTSD, or maybe a military brat ready to take the next steps to join the Air Force, or a veteran wanting to connect with others through shared experiences, then this is the right podcast for you. My name is Laura Figures, and this is the Freedom Isn't Free podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Laura Figures. First, thank you for joining me each and every single week as we continue to bring you inspiring stories or resources that address is freedom free. Today, I wanted to take a little bit of time to continue the discussion from our mental health awareness episode and to dive a little bit deeper. For the month of June, it is the National Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder Awareness Month, and it is intended to raise public awareness around issues related to PTSD, to reduce the stigma associated with PTSD, and to help ensure that those suffering from this invisible wound of war receives proper treatment. Now, PTSD is a mental health problem that some people develop after experiencing or witnessing a life-threatening event like combat or a natural disaster, maybe even a car accident or sexual assault. Now, anyone can develop PTSD at any age. A number of factors can increase the chances that someone will have PTSD, many of which are not under that person's control. For an example, having a very intense or long-lasting traumatic event or getting injured during the event can make it more likely that that person will have PTSD. PTSD is also more common after certain types of trauma, like combat and sexual assault. Personal factors like previous traumatic exposure, age, and gender can play an effect whether or not a person will develop PTSD. Now, what happens after the traumatic event is also important. Stress can make PTSD more likely, while social support can make it less likely. Going through trauma is not rare. Actually, about 6 out of every 10 men, which is about 60%, and 5 out of every 10 women, which is 50%, experience at least one traumatic event in their life. Women are more likely to experience sexual assault and child sexual abuse, and men are more likely to experience accidents, physical trauma, combat, disasters, or be witnesses to the death or injury. Now, PTSD can happen to anyone, like I said. It is not a sign of weakness. A number of factors can increase the chances that someone would develop PTSD. Now, here are some statistics based on just the US population. About 8 out of every 100 will have PTSD at some point in their life. About 8 million adults have PTSD during a given year. This is only a small portion of those that have gone through a trauma. About 10 of every 100 women develop PTSD sometimes in their lives, compared with about 4 out of every 100 men. Now, PTSD symptoms usually start soon after the traumatic event, but they may not appear until months or years later. They also may come and go over many of the years. If the symptoms last more than 4 weeks, cause you great distress, or interfere with your work and home life, you might have PTSD. There are 4 types of PTSD symptoms, but they may not be exactly the same for every person. Each person experiences these symptoms in their own ways. Now, one symptom is reliving the event or re-experiencing the symptoms, right? Memories of the traumatic event can come back at any time. You may feel the same fear or horror you did when the event took place. For an example, nightmares. Or you may feel like you're going through the event again, like a flashback, or something that you might see, hear, smell, something that causes you to relive the event. This is called a trigger. News reports, seeing an accident, or hearing a car backfire are examples of triggers. Now, another symptom is avoiding situations that remind you of the event. You may avoid some situations or people that trigger these memories of the traumatic event. You may also even avoid talking or thinking about the event. An example may be that you avoid crowds because they feel dangerous, or you may avoid driving if you were in a car accident or if you were in a military convoy bombing. Another example is if you were in an earthquake, you may avoid watching movies about earthquakes. You try to keep busy and avoid seeking help because it keeps you from having to think or talk about the event. Now, another symptom is negative changes in your beliefs or feelings. The way you think about yourself or others change because of the trauma. Now, this symptom has many aspects. You may not have positive or loving feelings towards this person, or you may stay away from relationships. Another aspect of this symptom is that you may forget about parts of the traumatic event or may not be able to talk about it with them. Lastly, you may think that the world is completely dangerous and no one can be trusted. Now, the fourth PTSD symptom is feeling keyed up, hyperarousal. You may be jittery and always on alert and on the lookout for danger. You might be suddenly become angry and irritable. That's known as hyperarousal. You may have hard time sleeping, trouble concentrating, settled by, loud noises or surprises. You may want to have your back to the wall in a restaurant or in a waiting room. Now, after these type of traumatic events, it's normal to think, act, and feel differently than usual. But most people start to feel better after a few weeks or months. Talk to a doctor or a mental health care provider. If your symptoms last longer than a few months, you become very upset about things, or it disrupts your daily life. Getting better means different things for different people, right? So there are different treatment options for PTSD. For many people, these treatments can get rid of symptoms altogether. Others find they have fewer symptoms or feel that their symptoms are less intense. Now, your symptoms don't have to interfere with your everyday activities, work, or relationships. Now, there are two main types of treatments: psychotherapy, which is, talking to a counselor, or talk therapy. And then there's medication. Sometimes people combine those two together. Psychotherapy or counseling involves meeting with the therapist. Trauma-focused psychotherapy, which focuses on the memory of the traumatic event, which is the most effective treatment for PTSD. There are different types of trauma-focused psychotherapy, such as cognitive processing therapy, which is where you learn skills to, understand how trauma changed your thoughts and your feelings, change how you think about the trauma, and can change how you feel. Another is prolonged exposure, where you talk about the trauma repeatedly until the memories are no longer upsetting. This will help you get control over your thoughts and feelings about the trauma. You can also go to places and do things that are safe, but that you have been staying away from because they remind you of the trauma. And then lastly, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which basically involves focusing on sounds and hand movement while you talk about the trauma. This actually helps your brain work through the traumatic memories. Now, the medication side of the house, can be very effective also. So some types of SSRIs and SNRIs, which are used for depression, also work for PTSD. This includes citrulline, paroxetine, fluoxetine, and venlafaxine. Now, to give you a little bit of history of PTSD Awareness Month, In 2010, Senator Ken Conrad pushed to get an official recognition of PTSD via a day of awareness in tribute to a North Dakota National Guard member who took his life following 2 tours in Iraq. Staff Sergeant Joe Bile died in 2007 after suffering from PTSD. Bile committed suicide after his return from duty to his home state. Staff Sergeant Bile's birthday, June 27th, was selected as the official PTSD Awareness Day, which is now observed every year. In 2014, the Senate designated the full month of June for the National Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder Awareness Month. Whereas this designation of National Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder Awareness Month will raise public awareness about issues related to PTSD, reduce the stigma associated with PTSD, and to help ensure that those suffering from, again, this invisible wound of war receive proper treatment. Now, if you were in the military and you've seen combat, you may have been on missions that have exposed you to horrible and life-threatening experiences. These types of events can lead to PTSD. The number of veterans with PTSD by service era, first, Operation Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom. About 11 to 20 out of the every 100 veterans who served in Operations Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom have PTSD in a given year. The Gulf War, about 12 out of the every 100 Gulf War veterans have PTSD in a given year. And for the Vietnam War, it is estimated that about 30 out of every 100 Vietnam veteran have had PTSD in their lifetime. Other factors in combat situations can add more stress to an already stressful situation. This may contribute to PTSD and other mental health problems. These factors include what you do in the war, the politics around the war, and where the war is fought, and the type of enemy you face. Another cause of PTSD in the military can be military sexual trauma. Now, this is any sexual harassment or sexual assault that occurs while you're in the military. Military sexual trauma can happen to both men and women and can occur during peacetime training and war. Among veterans who used VA healthcare, about 23 out of the 100 women reported sexual assault in the military. 55 of the 100 women and 38 out of the 100 men have experienced sexual harassment while in the military. There are many more male veterans than there are of female veterans. So even though the military sexual trauma is more common in women veterans, over half of all veterans with military sexual trauma are men. Now, speaking from experience, I suffer from PTSD after a sexual assault. It's normal to have upsetting memories, feelings, being on edge or having trouble sleeping after a traumatic event. At first, it may be hard to just do normal activities, go to work, go to school, spend time with your loved ones. But most people start to feel better after a couple months. But listen, if it's been longer than a few months, you still are having symptoms, you have PTSD. For people, PTSD symptoms may start later or they may come and go over time. Although there are a core set of PTSD symptoms that are required for diagnoses, PTSD does not look the same in everyone. In addition, symptoms may come and go and may change over time from childhood to later adult. Like I said before, there are several different symptoms like avoidance, anniversaries, triggers, young trauma survivors, PTSD in children and in teens, or, just our veteran population. Those of you experiencing symptoms of PTSD or PTSD-like issues should seek immediate help. The Department of Veteran Affairs Medical Facilities Private care providers, counselors, therapists can all be helpful in establishing an initial care regimen or referring those suffering from PTSD to a qualified care provider. The Department of Veteran Affairs has more information on the help for PTSD on its official website, including how to find a therapist. For those of you that are experiencing suicidal feelings or self-destruction, I'm urging you, please go see help. The Suicide Crisis Hotline is 1-800-273-8255. They have resources for veterans, and the Department of Veteran Affairs offers a Veterans Crisis Hotline confidential chat resource. For those of you that are listening, as always, don't forget to thank a veteran for their service. I love hearing from you, my listeners, military heroes, veterans, spouses. Message me your stories and let your voice be heard. And while you're doing that, go inside the podcast app, leave a 5-star review and a 5-star rating. This helps us reach more people. And if you want to be a part of this mission by helping us provide a voice for our service members, then make sure you subscribe. It makes a difference by leaving a review. And remember to thank a veteran.